Castillon Confidential by Albert Castillo. Welcome, insiders. This is a breaking news update about the government of Pedro Sánchez in Spain. He has once again twisted things to squeeze Spanish democracy in his favor. The last time he took a few days off because his wife was indicted, he allegedly set up the state's dirty tricks operation to threaten, bribe, or blackmail judges, prosecutors, journalists, and civil guards. Well, this time what seems to have activated Sanchez's mind and intentions is the withdrawal of the passport. It happened a few days ago. Begoña Gómez's passport was withdrawn. She is forbidden to leave the country, and every 15 days she must appear before a judge to confirm that she has not fled from Spanish justice. In a few months, she will stand trial and could go to prison. That confiscation of her passport has provoked an unprecedented, aggressive, even violent reaction in Sánchez, at least verbally, according to what she says. Her inner circle, the Moncloa circle, has already gotten used to her banging on the table or the loud tone of some of her shouts. Gentlemen, Sánchez has sped up a plan he's had since he arrived at Moncloa in the summer of 2018, and now he's put it into first gear. And that plan, yes, is to stay in power at least until 2031. Why? Protect yourself with CyberGhost VPN. Yes, gentlemen, Pedro Sánchez has had a plan since he arrived at Moncloa in 2018, and now he has ordered to shift into first gear to accelerate that plan to the maximum. After taking over all the institutions of the state, after manipulating the head of state, the king, to his convenience, from obeying him to signing illegal amnesties and unconstitutional laws. Now we have to take the next step so that Sánchez's objective is fulfilled. The objective: the king must collaborate with his silence by looking the other way, and he must be willing to let things happen, at least until 2031. Just like Don Felipe's father did, leaving for Abu Dhabi in that self-imposed exile. Or like Don Felipe's grandfather did, the Count of Barcelona, exiling himself in Portugal. Or Don Felipe's great-grandfather, Alfonso XIII, leaving in a hurry from Cartagena to go into exile in Italy and France. It's not the first time a Bourbon has left this country, because a tyrant, a dictator, orders the republic to be proclaimed. And pay attention, because that's Pedro Sánchez's goal. He says it more and more openly each time. He doesn't hide anymore. Listen to him. This was just a few days ago.
There's no doubt about it. Spain is going to be a better country in 2027 than it was in 2023. And let's not even mention that it will be better than the Spain they left us in 2018. And it will be even better in 2031 with 4 more years of progressive government.
Gentlemen, Pedro Sánchez has a plan, and it's to proclaim himself president of the Third Spanish Republic. And if possible, on the same date it was proclaimed almost 100 years ago, April 14, 1931. Next April 14, 2031, 100 years since the anniversary of something, which Sánchez often recalls in his speeches, which he supports with subsidies. The democratic memory law enters the picture. But what was the adventure of the Second Republic in Spain like? Is it worth repeating? The one who has the facts, Paco Alvarez, historian, welcome.
How are you? Delighted to be with you all.
How did that go?
Very badly. It was a disaster. To begin with, the Second Republic was born from municipal elections that it actually lost. In other words, most of the councillors elected were monarchists. But well, suddenly this Second Republic was proclaimed, and a group of politicians said, "This is our chance." They created a constitutional assembly. They made a constitution. In fact, they repeated the elections where they had lost so they could win them. And well, it was never a democracy. I mean, it was a system that was designed as a means to an end. And the end was obviously not democracy. In fact, it was a political system, or rather a program of cultural and institutional reforms, whose goal was to eliminate the Catholics and the constitutionalists, conservatives, from any influence they might have in politics. This was for us, for those who won, for those who still consider themselves the leaders of the Second Republic.
Notice that the Second Republic is seen by many media outlets and the left as a magnificent period of progress in Spain. They say that universal suffrage for women was allowed, that there were more schools than ever before. In short, that the country was making progress until the damned Franco regime arrived. Was it like that?
No, I mean, to begin with, the first time women voted in Spain was in 1924, 7 years before the establishment of the Republic, under the dictatorship of Primo de Rivera. Anyone can look this up online. But no, they made up the 1933 thing. What's more, women in the Second Republic voted despite the socialists and the left who didn't want to grant women the right to vote. As Clara Campoamor, for example, denounced many times. And regarding the schools, what the Second Republic did was close all the schools run by religious groups. So yes, of course, they opened public schools, more public schools than before. It was because they closed the ones already operating. And besides, I want to say those public schools were not provided with the resources or with, well, even though the idea of the Republican teacher and all that sounds very nice, those teachers were heroes because they didn't have any resources at all. And those schools, well, they didn't really teach anything either.
In 5 years, there was a lot of violence during the Second Republic. There was every kind of violence.
I mean, look, I can tell you every year, for example, in 1931, 196 people died due to political violence. 190 in 1932, 311 in 1933. In 1934, with the revolution caused by the Socialist Party, which did not accept the result of the elections, 1,457. 428 in 1936 before the war. Between 30 and 35 67.3 public buildings were set on fire. 739 private homes were burned or destroyed. 58 churches, 58 bridges it must be, the bridges were fascist, and 26 factories were damaged. Or it must be said it was a time of great political violence, many times between the left-wing parties themselves. As later happened in the civil war that we saw in Catalonia, for example, the wars between the POUM and the anarchists, shooting in the streets of Barcelona, those kinds of things.
During the Second Republic, as I mentioned, the PSOE led a coup against the legitimate government. So if a centenary is celebrated with festivities or possibly another proclamation in 2031, that's likely totally. The centenary, the PSOE is the one who should celebrate it the least, right?
Later, the PSOE always saw that universal suffrage only served them to ratify the control they wanted to have over the Second Republic, not to share it, not so there would be a democracy. They wanted power, as Largo Caballero always said. In other words, if we don't win it at the polls, we'll have to win it through a civil war. I mean, the Socialist Party of the Second Republic was not democratic. We're in a time when democracy wasn't working. For example, they did something that may sound familiar. They created what they called the Court of Political Responsibilities, with the aim of purging judges or prosecutors whose actions did not follow the doctrine of the Popular Front.
Does that ring a bell?
Man, they call it lawfare now, right?
Yeah, that's what they say now, whenever a judge mentions it. Also recently, we made you a confidential hero discussing how the Second Republic's Attorney General ended up murdered by socialist militiamen because he had dared to charge Largo Caballero.
It's tremendous. Well, I know someone who thinks the same even today. Can you imagine, as a historian, a third Spanish Republic with Sánchez at the helm?
I hope neither our eyes nor our children's eyes ever see that. Because look, just one thing. If we were in a republic now, the president would probably be Zapatero, right? He was the moral beacon of the left. He would come out onto the palace balcony with the jewels, or I don't know, it's a nightmare.
Totally. Jaco, thank you for this gesture. As a historian, you have to know history so you don't repeat it. Take care.
Take care, friends.
However, despite what the historian tells us, Pedro Sánchez does not give up on his efforts. He needs to remain prime minister until that date arrives. That's why there's a change in the electoral census, the grandchildren law, and the massive regularization. Offer his Catalan and Basque separatist partners whatever they want. Even a referendum, yes, even an independence referendum. That old dream of turning Spain into a nation of nations. For that dream, for those of us who defend this country, it's a nightmare. It could come true with Sánchez. To do that, as I said, he has to remove the King of Spain and get rid of something that stands in his way: immunity. The king's immunity. The king is the only one who is immune, the only one who cannot be judged or investigated in Spain, neither for his public activities nor for his private activities. Carmen Calvo, when she was Sanchez's vice president in 2022, already had meetings with the royal house and with the Popular Party to try to eliminate that immunity. It was then said the time wasn't right, that it was too soon. According to what we've been told, now it is. Now Sánchez wants to make it possible for the king to be put on trial. With what intention? What does Sánchez know that the rest of us don't? If he removes that condition of immunity, he would make him vulnerable. What does Sánchez know about the king's activities that could be criminal? That's a question that remains unanswered. Look, the first one who saw very clearly that Sánchez wants to stay in power was Albert Rivera in 2019. Look.
The Sánchez plan is a plan by which Mr. Sánchez wants to stay in power by controlling public television, the polls, criminalizing constitutionalists, and whitewashing his allies. That's the Sánchez plan.
The more corruption cases are brought to court around President Pedro Sánchez, the more he wants to put this plan into action. He steps on the accelerator even more so that it happens soon and quickly. Although the first step is to remain in power with the support of his partners. First test exam possibly in 2027. Some say that before then, elections would not be held in July. And it seems he wants to move them up to January, February, or March of 2027. Why move them up by just a few months? Because that way there would be general elections before the trial of his wife, Begoña Gómez. A trial that will allegedly take place in April or May of 2027. He doesn't want that after a trial that will undoubtedly be high profile and could possibly lead to her conviction or imprisonment. They have to choose their representatives at the polls with that memory in mind. Better earlier. Better for media manipulation to make it seem as if they have forgotten what she, her brother, and everyone around her have done. The more time passes, the more people are indicted, the more are in prison, the tighter the noose around Sánchez becomes. And around Zapatero, his political mentor. We asked him whether Sánchez intends to become president of the Third Republic, Eduardo García Serrano. He had no doubts.
I have no doubt about it. Look, they learned a lesson from their defeat in 1939, a lesson they are carrying out without hurry, without pause, and magnificently executed. From 1931 to 1939, in those 8 years, they tried to make Spain the first Bolshevik republic, the first Soviet republic, the Soviet Republic of Southern Europe. That was the goal. And they did it in a brutal way. They did it in a brutal way, and it went wrong for them. It went wrong. They have learned from Gramsci's theory of entryism, right? And from there, since Franco's death, with institutionalization and democracy, they have overlapped within democracy to gradually destroy that democracy, gradually. paulatinamente. Without much fuss, without militiamen in overalls and Mausers in the streets killing left and right. And they've done it just as Gramsci taught them, by infiltrating the major institutions of the state, filling them with their own agents. The justice system, the judiciary, education, the media, and the army. And they've had 50 years to do it, and it's working for them.
Gentlemen, Sánchez has activated this plan. Stopping him is everyone's responsibility. First of all, it's up to the justice system, the UCO, the UDEF, and the decent prosecutors. There are still a few left, and the state attorneys who are not yet under his control. Of the free press and ultimately of the citizens, to be responsible of everyone, to prevent this dictator from staying in power as he intends. There are those who think he doesn't care about losing the elections in 2027 because he plans to remain as the Secretary General of the PSOE, run again and win them again. And he's very capable. Don't forget his favorite book, which they say he wrote himself, which is also a lie, like everything about him. Manual of Resistance. He's putting it into practice every day. Serve safely with CyberGhost.
Castillon Confidential by Albert Castillo.